Diversity, equity, driving the economy, building infrastructure, international trade deals, and more. Watch as I go over some of the key moments of this weekend's Liberal convention on today's episode of the Roundup. The Roundup. Just enough content to get your daily dose of politics. Floor crossers made a splash this weekend when both Marilyn, Gladu, and Chris D'Entremont, who betrayed their own constituents by the way, were given opportunities to provide speeches and interviews to the delegates and members of the Liberal caucus. Both the media and constituents in her riding have pointed out that Marilyn must have amnesia. With her decision to cross came a complete 180-degree flip in her political and moral foundations. Only a few weeks ago, she was on the floor of the House of Commons screaming at the Liberal caucus for their corruption and their complete and abject failures across the board to serve Canadians, something she has been staunchly hard-lined about during her entire time in office. Whether it's amnesia, blackmail, backdoor deals, or maybe just a desire to have her face in the spotlight, we know one thing. She's just another example of Liberal corruption, with no fear of accountability or oversight to stem the ever-growing tide of shite being thrown in our face.
I've watched the Prime Minister and all the things he's doing since he's been elected, the things he's driving forward, fast-tracking, building, nation-building projects, diversifying our trade, strengthening our defense, combating crime, and building more homes. These are the priorities that meet this moment for our country.
Okay, so I've taken a lot of time to go through the 45th Parliament House of Commons debates to find Gladu's input. Let's take a moment to compare Liberal Gladu and Conservative Gladu on her sentiments around building defense spending and combating crime.
Fast-tracking, building, nation-building projects. The housing minister is tasked with addressing the housing crisis that has been caused by 10 years of failed Liberal policies. Now, the former Minister of Housing indicated that they'd have to build 550,000 units every year for 4 years to catch up with the massive increase in immigration that he caused. But the current minister has just announced $13 billion to build only 4,000 units. That's $3.25 million per unit. That's not affordable housing. I'm not surprised, since when the minister was the mayor of Vancouver, he helped create the most expensive housing bubble on the planet. And now, to run the new government bureaucracy, he's hired Anna Baleo, a former Toronto City Councillor who was supposed to create affordable housing and instead created the second highest priced housing bubble on the planet. Well, Mr. Speaker, I didn't really hear the answers I was looking for. They're saying that the $13 billion bureaucracy is going to start with 4,000 homes, but the fact remains nothing's been built, and housing starts are down 13% in the country. Young people are losing hope of ever being able to afford a home. The minister has had 6 months. What's going to be built? How many apartments? How many modular homes that Brookfield and the Prime Minister, as a direct result, will profit from are going to be built? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member opposite. I just wondered if he is concerned that after all this talk about how they're going to build, that this current emissions cap, which is really a productions cap, is actually contrary to the plan to build. Madam Speaker, Canada has lost over 5,000 automotive jobs. 32 paper mills have shut down, and in my riding, 3 facilities are shutting down. 51,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost in the year since the Prime Minister took charge. He said he was going to build, baby, build, but the only thing he's built is the highest unemployment rate for youth we've seen in a generation.
Notice that Conservative Gladu claimed that the Liberals are responsible for rising housing costs, economic and industry collapse, corruption, ballooning bureaucracy, failed crime policies, and policies driven by personal gain. Not to mention that Liberal Gladu sounds like she's reading a Fantasyland storybook to kindergartners.
And building more homes. And building more homes. And building more homes.
Which is coincidentally the same story Liberals try to feed Canadians. So, I guess that tracks.
Strengthening our defense. And, the other thing that I'm not happy about is to see that we're going to build, but what we're really building in this budget is bureaucracy. So instead of buying F-35s, we'll build a defense procurement bureaucracy. Why do we need that, Madam Speaker? We don't. We need to buy things that are going to help, our NATO allies to put us in a place where we could defend our sovereignty. Combating crime? I guess my question really relates to the fact that right now we're not even enforcing our existing laws. So we have repeat offenders out on the street committing gun crimes, committing car thefts, and we're not addressing those. And so, you know, adding additional laws, if they're not going to be enforced, is not going to really help the situation. Why did the government not put measures in this bill to address their catch and release policies?
What a load of crap. She has spent the last year criticizing Carney's every political move, and rightly so. But what we see here is someone who has decided that her constituents no longer matter. Their vote no longer matters. Their beliefs no longer matters. She represents herself, and it's going to get much, much worse. How worse it actually gets is most likely determined by the voice, normally speaking in the back rooms with no microphones or cameras, that helps shape Carney's New World Order agenda. That voice belongs to Diana Fox Carney. That's who I was talking about, by the way.
Thank you to all volunteers and constituency workers. You make the Liberal Party the broad and effective political force that we need in these troubling times.
Don't you think it's quite ironic that she's implying that Canada's in these troubled times, and she insists that it's most likely caused by some outside force? And the message Liberals present? Only they can fix it. It's their endless spending and open border fantasies that caused troubled times in the first place. She then piles on praise for Canadians' remarkable kindness that supposedly makes her family's life easier. She's crediting voters for choosing Mark's vision of a positive, unified, and above all strong country, as if repeating unity and strength like a mantra will paper over the economic wreckage and identity politics they've inflicted on everyone.
On election night, I expressed my gratitude to Canadians for choosing my husband's vision of a positive, unified, and above all, strong country.
Positive? The country has never been more negative. Unified? Give me a break. Only 45% of voters voted in favor of Liberal MPs. Liberal groups resorted to creating long ballots against the Conservative leader himself, not once, but twice, to try and force him from remaining in office. The Long Ballot Committee claimed to be fighting against a first-past-the-post system, but noticed that it was only Pierre who faced 90 other ballots, which happens to be the longest in federal election history. Carney, on the other hand, faced 4 other candidates. Not saying this is why you lost, but it is malpractice at best. And strong? We have one of the weakest militaries on earth. We are polarized, and we have a failing economy. And honestly, I don't have to keep going down the list, but the list is long. I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, I know. Point being, we're hearing quintessential Liberal talking points out of Diana.
My husband and I have been stopped on the streets of Mumbai, Sydney, London, and Paris, and of course, throughout Canada, by people from all backgrounds, seeking to thank Canada for our country's global leadership. I have been told of university students already being required to read my husband's now quite famous Davos speech.
I'll take things that didn't happen for 1,500, Alex. And please, spare us the elitist Davos drivel and that tired beacon slogan. It's just virtue signaling for more carbon taxes, wealth redistribution, a word I can't say apparently, and giving up our sovereignty to the EU and global elites.
Of intergenerational dinner table conversations being sparked by its contents, of new possibilities opening up in its wake, of Canada being the nation that is helping to define and shape a new world order.
A new world order. Remember when anyone who used that term, they were considered not just conspiracy theorists, but the most radical of conspiracy theorists, the tinfoil crown-wearing, most sycophantic of conspiracy theorists. Now leaders, particularly WEF touting globalists, are freely dropping that name on a regular basis. They are clearly emboldened by their power. Speaking of power, Carney begins his speech with typical Liberal prattle. Thank you for being awesome and diverse. And you guys are awesome and diverse. And we will be awesome and diverse. And my wife is awesome and diverse. And our policies are awesome and diverse. And our country is awesome and diverse. Then he spends a minute to say absolutely nothing.
We should be under no illusions. The path we've chosen is hard. There will be headwinds, black ice, steep climbs along the way. We'll have to be pragmatic and determined to keep moving forward. But this is the journey that we must make. Because we are meeting in the middle of a transformation that will define our country for generations.
I can see his speechwriters just putting it all together. Black ice, headwinds, more adjectives, more descriptors. Make it dark, make it ominous, because we gotta make it look like he's a shining light.
The world's changing. Not gradually, but suddenly. Yes, some are still in denial. Rather than starting on this journey, they're waiting for the past to return.
I love how he takes a shot at anyone who doesn't share in his aspirations here, namely conservatives, Christians, and Canadians who want Canada to remain a country that we remember growing up.
The foundations of the international order, the order which Canada helped build and from which we have benefited for so long, that order is crumbling.
How could we not jump on board with a new world order or globalist agendas that he promises to put in place, all the while making sure he benefits in the process?
At this decisive moment, Canadians are demonstrating just how strong we are. You know, it started quietly. People choosing a wine from the Okanagan over one from California. Anyone had any bourbon recently? No, I don't think so, no. Sorry. A family planning a vacation to Prince Edward Island instead of booking flights to Florida.
So the grand reshaping of our world is essentially building on distancing ourselves from the last stronghold for freedom on earth. Wine and bourbon? Well, considering they took American alcohol off the shelves in protest, what a non sequitur claim that is. And this idea that Canadians not flying to Florida is completely misleading. Canadians aren't going anywhere primarily because they can't afford to. And secondly, those who are traveling are still going to Florida. I myself am getting married there later this year. Take that, elbows up, Carney. According to the WSF, Florida attracted a record 143.3 million visitors last year. So it seems the world didn't get the memo, Carney. Regarding trips to Florida, the same article notes that 2.9 million visitors visited from Canada. That is down 14.7%. Interesting stat line there. While international travel to Florida has increased, Canada travel has decreased. True. What about travel elsewhere though? In December, Canadian travel was down 15%. And in November, it was down 14.4%. The media and even Statistics Canada reports are focusing on the drop to the US, but they skim over the fact that Canadians are just not traveling because they can't afford to. Yeah. Elbows up, Carney. Just a side note, did you notice that those percentage points were exactly the same for both Florida and international travel in general? He goes on for another 20 minutes using the same old tired tropes and buzzwords without actually defining anything specific, which is funnily enough the same thing that liberals accuse Poilievre of doing, with one important difference. The Conservatives aren't in power. So what was his message on the whole? For Canadians to prepare for a change. That we are not going back to the way that things were. Canada as we know it is finished. We are moving forward toward a new world order. If you've been watching my videos, you can already see what that entails. Let's finish off with a few fun moments, shall we?
Mokum Singh Malik, Surrey Centre. Fellow delegates, I'm a third-generation Canadian. I was born in the same hospital as my parents. I don't consider myself anything but a Canadian. Yet stepping off of the flight here to Montreal, I was reminded that I am not equal in my own country. For the first time in my life this morning, I was refused entry into this building for carrying a kirpan. I had to justify my existence. This was a reminder that fundamental rights are not fundamental across the country. No person in Canada should have to justify their turban, their beard, their religious rights, their fundamental rights. This is a fundamental part of the Canadian experience. What is our party? What are our values if we are going to allow our rights to be violated? This is not a game. This is my rights. This is your rights. This is our country. I encourage you, we must disallow these laws that are violating our rights. I'm in favor. Thank you.
How does preventing you from entering an event filled with public figures because you're carrying a 9-inch blade amount to you not having an existence? No person should have to justify their turban? Well, you get an exemption that no one else gets for having a head covering. You can ride motorcycles without a helmet. You can wear one while taking a photo for your ID. You wear one while partaking in sports. Your beard? Well, when was the last time you saw a Sikh wearing a beard net behind the counter of a Tim Hortons or a McDonald's or a Subway? I wouldn't know because I don't really go to those establishments, but I have seen many without them in other restaurants that I have frequented. And your harpin, you're the only group that's allowed to walk around with not only harpins, but sahibs that are over 2 feet long. You'll prance around cities on horses, waving these swords in the air without any sort of repercussions. You can even carry them on planes. So excuse me if I don't feel sorry for you feeling that your existence has been trampled simply because you couldn't enter a public building with one. Give me a break.
Parce que dans un monde plus divisé, dans un monde plus compétitif et dans un monde plus incertain, le Canada s'élève. And that doesn't happen by accident, my friends. That happens because we have a prime minister with a vision to build the strongest economy in the G7, a vision to double our overseas trade, a vision to enable $1 trillion of investment, and that vision is something every single person in this room has helped us build, and you should be very proud of the work that you have done, because we have been inspired by you, you have inspired us, and now we're delivering together for Canadians.
Not to mention a vision to let our loved ones and friends benefit from nepotism, backdoor deals, and spending billions on useless projects that serve yourselves.
You forgot that, Francois. Remember, Francois' wife was given the position of VP of Environment for the Alto project, a project that is slated to cost $90 billion and take over a decade to build. Can't beat long-term guaranteed high-income employment.
So let me give you a few facts. In Canada, the minute you have your degree, if it's a professional degree, it's called the TN program. I finished from University of Waterloo with my computer degree. Microsoft phones me, offers me a job, $300 grand a year. All I have to do is show up at the border, apply for a TN visa, and now I move to Microsoft. We as Canadians have subsidized my education to the tune of, you pick the number, $500,000, right? 500,000. And if it's a graduate student, go up, right? 30,000 TN go to the US every year. You want to save yourself $5 to $10 billion? Shut the TN program. Or make them pay their $500,000 so that if they leave, I'm okay with that.
I posted this yesterday and had to include it in the roundup today. So essentially, a self-made millionaire admits to taking advantage of Canada's publicly funded education, immediately left Canada to work for more money in the States, and now that he's made his fortune, wants to force Canadians to either pay to pursue the same career opportunities or force them to stay here where those opportunities don't exist. Or if they do, they get paid less and taxed more. Thanks, Patrick. You are the epitome of what it means to be a liberal. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have ex-Prime Minister, accused pedophile, and current love interest of Katy Perry, Justin Trudeau. Just kidding. I won't subject you to that man's voice. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Roundup. We have a lot more to cover this week, so be sure to hit that notification bell, like and subscribe for more content. Also head over to criticalchris.com to send us a donation. Your donations help us to keep this platform running. Until next time, Chris out.